Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Sanhedrin Ayin Zion, Sanhedrin 77, and Daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim. That's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. The Gemara tells us on the bottom of, hold on one second. The Gemara tells us on the bottom of 76b, Ahu Gavra, there was a person, the Mitzamtzima, we're talking about a case where the damage is indirect. So what he did was he forced the person's animals to be kept in the sun. He did, and Umesa, and as a result of this, the animals died. So Ravina says, Ravina says that he has to pay for the damage that he did. He didn't put the animal in the sun, he just forced it to be in the sun. And so therefore, Ravina says he's chayev. Rav Acha says he's exempt. Ravina Mechayev because Kav Homer. He says let's learn it from a Rotzeach. Marotzeach Shel Asabo Shogeg Kamezid V'Ones Karaso. Just like by a Rotzeach, that the Torah says that you're not liable for accidentally, like purpose or ones or without any thought. Like if you do it willingly, you're only going to be liable if you do it intentionally and uh with intent and Boker Tov, good morning. How are you? I can't see. Is that Shia? Okay, Boker Tov. My eyes, it's very bad. So just like a Rotzeach, that the Torah does not do Shogeg Kamezid and Ones Karatzon. You're only liable if you do it bimazid, intentionally with Ratzon and that was your intent to do it. Chiyavo as a mitzamtzein. But nevertheless, if you force a person to remain in the fire, you don't put him there, but you force him to remain there, he's going to be liable. Nizakin, when it comes to damages, Sha'asabahan Shogeg Kamezid, Ones Karatzon. When it comes to Nizakin, we're comparing here the case of criminal to civil. So in the case of criminal, where generally speaking we don't say you're chayav if you do shogeg kamezid or ones karatzon, but if you're mitzamtzim, if you force the person to be in the sun, we're going to say you're liable. Nizakin damages sha'asaben shogeg kamezid ones karatzon, damages where we say an adam is muad wa'olam, even if you damage him accidentally, you're going to be chayav. We're on top of 77a. So Eino din shechayiv b'hem es mitzamtim. So for sure you should be liable if you were mitzamtim, if you just forced him to remain in a place where he already was. Or Rav Acha Barav says he's poter. Rav Acha Barav argues Ravina, and he says he is poter. He exempts him. And why? Rashi explains. It takes us back to Nezikin, because the Grama Ba'alma was just the damages. And we say the Shamsha Katle, the son is what killed him. That's how Rashi explains it. So the question is, do we compare it to Rotzeach, in which case you'd be liable, or do we compare it to damages, in which case, do we compare it to a Rotzeach, in which case you'll be liable, or do we compare it to damages, in which case you'll be exempt by indirect? So, Amar Masharsha, my time, Davua, the Abba, the Poter. So Masharsha says, what's the reason why the Avua, the Abba, what's the reason why basically the father of my father says that it is that you're going to be exempt, that if you damage somebody by being mitzamtzim there, by forcing them to remain in the place where there was a dangerous thing, what's the reason why you're exempt? It says most you must amakeh rotzeachu. The pasuk says the rotzeach shall be put to death, the murderer shall be put to death, which means rotzeachu dechayav one mitzamtzim. But only in the case of rotzeach are we going to say that if you just force them to be there, you're going to be liable. But b'nizakin will chayav on mitzamtzin. But by a case of damages, you're not going to be liable if you're mitzamtzin. Amar Rava. So now we're going to have similar cases. Kafata umeis berav. Let's say you tie a guy up when you leave him on a deserted island and he dies from hunger. Potter, you're going to be exempt in that case. Why? Rash explains. The b'shasha kapto enkan variga. When you tied him up, you weren't killing him. La rav b'mei elav. And the hunger comes on its own. V'chizek la'achar kol shah. And it only happened after a period of time. And it's not similar to the case of where you force them to be in the fire or the water, because there it's already extant. So we're saying even according to Ravina, we're going to say that according to everybody, even though mitzam same, if you're forced somebody to be in the fire or the water, you're going to be chayev. But in this case, the dangerous element wasn't there immediately; it only came after the fact. Rama Rava kafto b'chama umeis, and Rava says if you force him to be in the sun, if you tie him up in the sun and he dies, he's liable. But if you force him to be in the cold, umeis chayev. So Rava says if you force him to be in the sun and he dies, or if you force him to be in the cold and he dies, he's liable. Because sov cham lavo, sov tzina lavo. Because the sun, we always say in a case where sov cham lavo or sov tzina lavo potter. But if we're going to say if there was no sun when you tied him up, but we know that it's going to be 110 degrees tomorrow in the desert, and you tied him up at night, even though we know that in the end that the sun will be there and he won't be able to withstand the heat, then he's still going to be exempt. Because there, since Rashi says, since the Hareg was not Mezuman La'ariga, meaning to say, since at that moment he wasn't right there, the sun wasn't there, it's considered Karama indirect. And Rashi says in all these cases, Ein Dino Masar or Bezdin Elo Shamayim. Rashi says in all these cases, we have to remember that this person is not exempt from punishment by heaven. He's going to be facing the punishment by heaven, but he's just not facing the punishment by a human court. Rava says if you tied him up before a lion and the lion killed him, he's going to be exempt. Meaning to say, why? Why is he exempt here? Rashi says, because even if you wouldn't have tied him up, he wouldn't have been able to save himself from the lion. But if you tied him up before the mosquitoes and the mosquitoes killed him, then we're going to say chayiv. Then we're going to say that you're liable under those circumstances. Because since he was tied up, he wasn't able to save himself from the mosquitoes. Rav Ashi says, nami patar. Rav Ashi says, even if you tied him up before the mosquitoes and he died, he's also going to be exempt, the one who tied him up, because the mosquito, he's killed by a swarm of mosquitoes. So the mosquitoes who were there when you tied him up, they're not the same ones that killed him. And so therefore they only came later on. And so therefore the tying up was not what killed him. It was just the grum. It was just indirect. That's how Rashi explains it. But Rashi says, "Lo meis leitei tushim harishonim shayim muchanim sham." He didn't die through the original mosquitoes who were there, because many mosquitoes came and attacked, and it was only the later ones. Tosfos doesn't like that, so he says that's not the distinction. The reason why he's exempt from a lion, Tosfos says, is because the lion wasn't there. Because if the lion had already jumped upon him and then he tied him up, then he'd be exempt. So we're obviously talking about a place, Tosfos, where the lion came later on. But the mosquitoes are talking about a case where they already began to attack him and then he tied him up. So Tosfos basically changes the scenario. So Laura says, okay, Itmar Kafalav Gigas. Let's say you put, a barrel over your friend who's sleeping, and as a result of this, he died from the vapors in the barrel. Ufaralav Maziva, or let's say you uncovered the roof and then he died from cold. One says that you're liable and one says you're exempt. So the one who says you're liable is because at the time that you covered him over with the barrel or you removed the roof, that was exactly the cause of death. It was right there. And so therefore, it's like you killed him through an arrow. One says you're exempt because when you put the barrel over or you uncover the roof, that he didn't die immediately, but he only died later on. And so therefore, it's indirect. This time, the Rava Huda Amar Patar. It's assumed that Rav is the one who says it's Pater. Damarava Kafato made Rav Pater. Isn't this the exact case where you tied him up and he died from famine? He died from hunger. He's exempt. So isn't this the same case? Nor says Adarav, just the opposite. You could say the opposite. This time, the Rabbi Zera Damar Pater. Rabbi Zera is the one who says that you're exempt. Why? Because the Amar Rabbi Zera, Haiman the Ailel Chavri the base of the Shisha. Rabbi Zera says somebody put his friend in a marble house. And so therefore, basically you covered him up in stone, so he's going to be suffocating. The other clay shraga, and then he lit a candle in the house, umace, and he dies from the smoke of the fire. He's liable. Time of the other clay shraga. Why is he liable? Because you lit a flame there, and that caused the for some reason that caused the vapors to go in there and die. Hello, the like shraga. But if he didn't light anything, well, he wouldn't be liable, even though he's basically going to be eventually suffocating in that circumstance. So we see there, Rabbi Zera says that you're exempt in a situation where you cover over the barrel over the person while he's sleeping. No, the Gemara says no. It's a distinction. Amri, where you put your friend into a house of marble, if you didn't light the flame, he's exempt. Why? Because without the fire, the bad vapors wouldn't have started. So it's and bishate when you put them into the house. But here in this case of the barrel, even without the flame, you wouldn't. The bad vapors would have killed them with the barrel. So therefore, Ravina would say, you're liable. So now we go into the next case. Different types of murder. Amarava, we have a simon, suam, tris, samanim, bakoso. Amarava, dechafu a bor. Let's say you pushed a person into a well. And suam babor, when you pushed him in, there was a ladder in the well. Uva achar v'silko. And then somebody else comes along and removes the ladder after he was pushed in. So now the person can't get out. Afilu who called him v'silko. Even if the person who himself pushed him in removed the ladder, potter, the one who pushed him in is exempt. The be'inna deshaje, because at the moment where he pushed him into the ladder, yachol alosu, because it's two separate actions. First action was he pushed him in. The guy could have gone up, so he didn't kill him. Then the second thing was he removed the ladder, and so therefore, then you can't obligate him because that's just a grama, that's just indirect. And so therefore, even though he did both actions and he might have done it right after each other, we're still going to say you're exempt under those circumstances. Let's say the guy, you shoot an arrow at your friend and he's holding a shield. And somebody else comes and removes the shield. Or even if the person who shot the arrow himself went and removed the shield, potter. Why? Because the moment he shot the arrow was going to be stopped. And so therefore he's going to be exempt under those circumstances. Let's say you shoot an arrow. This samanin biyado, and the person who you shoot it against has medicine to heal himself, and so it wouldn't be a mortal blow. And somebody else comes along and throws away his medicine. Even if the person who shot him throws away the antidote to the arrow, basically throws away the medicine, potter, the guy who shot it is exempt to be. Because at the moment he shot it, he could have been healed. So therefore, Rav Ashi says, once we've established that principle, even if he doesn't have the medicine, but the medicine is available in the marketplace, he's going to be exempt. Well, I'm not sure. Let's say the person could get meaning to say, according to you, who says that if the person who was shot had the medicine, it just wasn't on him, he's going to be exempt. Let's say he could buy it. What would be the law? Do we say that the person who shoots him is liable under those circumstances, or he's still exempt? Amar Rav Ashi says, since before he went to court, he could have healed himself. Hare Yetzimi based in Zakai. So we see from here that he should go out of the court being exempt because he could have gone and healed himself. The Amarava Zarak Tzror Bakoso. Okay, so now you throw something, let's say you throw a pebble, let's say you throw a ball into the wall, the Chazor Lacharev Arga, and it bounced back and killed the person. Hi, that's the person. So you say, is this indirect action? We say no, he's liable because the ball came from his own strength. V'tana Tuna. Going and Bryce says like those who play with the ball, that they throw a ball against the wall hard, and then it bounces back, and he grabs the ball and strikes the person, that he's going to be liable. Shahargu. B'mezid neragan b'shogeg going. So if he did it intentionally, he's going to be killed. If he did it accidentally, he's going to have to go into exile. Gemara says b'shogeg going pshita. So why do we need? Obviously, if he would be liable if he did this intentionally, then if he did it accidentally, he goes into exile. It's obvious. Why do you need to tell us that? So the Gemara says we need to learn it. B'mezid neragan itzruchay. Now we're teaching us the halacha that if you throw a ball and it bounces back and it kills him, that's what we need to learn. Mao the Tami might have thought Hasra Safeki. You might have thought it's impossible to give a warning for this, and it's only what's called Hasra Safek, a warning out of a doubt. Because if you want to say that they warn him that if you throw it, it could bounce back in a different direction and kill a person, that's Hasra Safek. We're doubtful. Mi Aimer Dahadra. How do you know it's going to return? Kamash one that we say no. Throwing the ball is indeed it's pretty direct there. That's certainly Asras Vaday. Tani Rav Tachifa bar Marava Kamed Rabbi Avo. Kagon Elu Amasachim Bikadur. So Rav Tachifa bar Marava taught this in front of Rabbi Avo. And he said, those people that throw the ball against the wall forcefully and it goes back, Shahargo, Tochar Ba'amos. They said, if it kills within the 4 amos of the wall, Pater, he's going to be exempt from running into exile. But but outside of 4 amos, Chayev, he's going to, the one who throws it has to go into exile. So Rashi's saying, this is Rashi's approach that we're talking about exile here. Meaning to say that that's the case. We're talking about Golas for killing accidentally. And we'll see as the Gemara explains it. What's the circumstance that we're making distinction between within 4 amos and outside of 4 amos? If the person wanted the ball to bounce back very far, afilu porta, even if it was just a little bit nami, he should also say he should even if it was just a little bit, he should be chayiv. Why would we say he's exempt? If he didn't want to go back, even if it was farther away, we should exempt him from Goa. So what's the deal? So we say, basically as a general rule, those people who are playing with balls, we say that they stand closer to the wall in order that it should go farther. And so therefore, if he wanted the ball to, and so therefore we assume that he wanted the ball to go farther than 4 amos from the wall. So therefore, if the person who was killed was standing within 4 amos of the wall, we say he didn't intend for it to go there. And so therefore, he's exempt from having to go into exile. But if he was standing farther away, we say that was his intent. And so therefore, he has to go into exile because he accidentally killed him. So we want to say that if a person throws a ball against the wall, that's considered his koach, his strength. But we have a contradiction to this from the Mishnah in Parah. Mekadesh. Somebody puts basically the ashes of the red heifer. I saw red heifers in Israel this past trip. So somebody takes the ashes of the red heifer and he mixes them with water. V'nafal kiddush al yado o atzad. And so therefore, and then some of the ashes that were intended to be sanctified in the water fell onto his hand or onto the side of the utensil. And then it fell into the water that was disqualified because it wasn't sanctified by a person. We're going to say it's possible. Under those circumstances, the water is disqualified to be spilled because the sanctification, the mixing with the water, was not done through the intent of the person. So, meaning to say, in that case, the water rebounded onto the ashes, rebounded onto the water. We're going to say it's disqualified. And we see from here that water that jumps off the hand is not considered like that it came from his own strength. So the Gemara says, Why, in that case, by the ashes of the red heifer, do we say that it's not as koach? But in the case of the bull, we say it's koach. So the Gemara says, in the case of the red heifer, he didn't throw the water; the water just dripped off of him, and so therefore we're going to say that's not considered his koach. Dashma. So Gemara is again going to attempt to prove from another Mishnah that if something rebounds, it's not going to be considered his own strength. So we're going to bring a proof from machat, from a needle that was tamei from a dead body. She'nesuna al acheres, that was placed on a piece of pottery. Vihiza Allah, and then we sprinkle the ashes on the needle in order to purify it. And we know v'safek al mechatiza, safek al charasiza. We're not sure if you initially sprinkled the ashes of the mechatas on the pottery or on the needle itself, and then or did you sprinkle it on the pottery? It went onto the needle, or then it wouldn't work. Or did you sprinkle it directly on the needle? So we say as also psul, it's disqualified. So we see from here that if you sprinkled it onto the pottery and then it dripped onto the needle, it's not considered direct. So that's the question on the rebound. It's not as koach. Made the Rav. No, the Tana is not saying. The Tana is not saying. The Tana is not saying. The Tana is saying matzah, meaning to say that you found it, meaning to say you're not sure what happened. And so therefore, we're not going to say that he sprinkled it on the needle, and because he just came upon the situation. So he says a person that ties his friend and he placed him by the banks of the river, and then afterwards he basically pushed in his direction the stream of water. Giri the day. We're going to say that's considered like it's his own arrows of Mechayev, and he's liable for execution like every murderer. But Hani Mili B'Koach Rishon, that's only the circumstance where it is the direct strength of the water, meaning to say that immediately after he diverted the water, it came upon him and killed him. But let's say he was far away from the water, from the sea, and so therefore it didn't go there direct, but it went initially to one place and afterwards fell upon him. Then we're going to say Grama Ba'amu. That's indirect and he's exempt. Amar Papa said, Zarak Sror Lamala. Let's say he threw a pebble into the air, and then the rock fell down and it killed a person. Chayev, he's going to be responsible. And Amarle Mar Baravashu at Papa my time, I'm Mishum Dekochu, because he's the one who threw it up. So therefore it's his strength, and so therefore he's liable. So the Gemara asks, if it's his strength and that's why he's liable, Tazil meaning say it should have kept going up. So, but if it's not his strength, so if you want to say, if it's not his strength, it should have fallen down immediately. So we want to say that the way the stone traveled is from the power of throwing it, but rather it wouldn't have continued to go up because it was a weak throw. But we say it's still considered koach kachosh. And so therefore we're going to make him responsible. It's a weak throwing. And so therefore we still say he's liable under those circumstances. So basically we're trying to figure out in this stuff what's considered his direct action to make him responsible. This is much, depending on the perspective, this is not direct. This is not the same as American law, where we say that you'd have a higher level of liability if it was your indirect action. But the Torah requires, the Talmud requires much more direct action in order to say you're liable. Okay, we'll stop here for today's daf. Yasher koach.